Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, 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 money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
Welcome back to another great episode of Easy Dubs, NFL Draft Edition. Today we have on another great capper. We have CashCing, at CashCing on Twitter with 2 capital C's. Today we're just kind of going to, chop it up, talk a little bit about the draft coming up on Thursday. I think we're all excited to kind of get into it. I know there's always some great value bets that you can put on the draft. So, let's just kind of get it going. I want to start off just tell us a little about your background, CashCing, and take us through how you got into capping and where you are now.
Yeah, man. So I grew up in New Jersey, played football my whole life, played basketball, baseball, but I ended up just playing football throughout high school and went out to California for JUCO. I had pretty bad grades in high school, but I had a couple offers, but couldn't take them, so I went out to JUCO. That's where I really started like gambling. I was in Bovada because it wasn't obviously legal out there. And then, so I started the account, I think it was November 2020. And I just like kind of felt out the community, seeing how everyone runs things, seeing how the good cappers do things, like even like just the tweets, like how they word their tweets and stuff. And then, I started posting my plays just to really kind of see how good I really am, like a spreadsheet almost. And then I kind of just got traction because I started winning. I think I started posting pics December of 2 college basketballs ago. So COVID college basketball. And I just started getting traction, started winning, and it was all free for about 2 years.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of have a similar background. I feel like a lot of our cappers, again, they were athletes as kids, and then a lot of them played in college, high school, all over the place. So I think in terms of background, it offers you a big leg up on a lot of guys, especially when it comes to the draft. Let's just
Easton,
hop into
before
the
we
draft.
hop into that.
Go ahead.
Question.
What's up?
Cash
Yeah.
King. Do you ever bet JUCO football? Is that even possible? Is there a book where I can bet on JUCO football?
I think you can bet on the national championship, like when
One
the
game per
EMCC
annum?
will play. I've never have, but maybe on the side, like with my boy or something, but never, you can't actually do it, I don't think. Unless it's a national championship.
If any sports books are listening, this is Greenfield territory. I would certainly sign up to play some JUCO football.
Little inside info.
I love that. Hey, you can always find value all over the board, right? JUCO football could be the wave of the future.
If you can bet on the NFL draft, you should be able to bet on JUCO football.
I agree.
For sure.
I agree.
You could bet on, like, I went to a pretty low-level Division I school. I went to 2 Division I schools, but I played at Western Illinois. And, I mean, that the Missouri Valley Conference, I mean, not many people follow it. Not many people know it. But, I mean, the books have lines out for it. So those aren't always the sharpest lines. So I always look at those lines compared to, like, Texas versus Texas Tech. You know what I'm saying?
That's where you find the value, especially if you got a little knowledge of the conference. I mean, We talk to cappers who are capping the fucking Russian hockey league. So if there's a puck or a ball,
wherever there's money, I am.
Yeah, I hear you. That's why they call you the Cash King. Anyway, we're off the rails already, but that's fine. Easton, get us back.
Lewis, I love it.
Hey,
I love talking about JUCO. There's nothing wrong with that. There's always something fun to add.
How accurate is Last Chance U?
So Last Chance U, they're actually like not even comparable to California JUCO because
in terms of talent, level of play, or just
talent-wise, is probably the same. But like you thought they were struggling out there, like they're all in dorms on meal plans. In California, there's no scholarships, no meal plans, no dorms.
It's just love ball guys fighting for.
Yeah, I lived the first year I was in JUCO. I lived in a house with 5 bedrooms with 15 kids.
Wow, that is insane. How many years did you stay out there?
Kids, 12 went to D1. What was that?
Wow, that's incredible. How long? How many seasons?
So I played for 1.5 years. So I went there for a season, and I stayed for the spring, and then the next fall, and I left.
Are the dudes cool? Given there's like a camaraderie, like shared struggle, blah blah blah, or is it just dog eat dog? I'm gonna get mine. Fuck you if you don't get yours. Because I could see it going either way.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's both. So, I mean, I met my closest friends in JUCO just because, like you said, the struggle, we're all struggling together, all that stuff. But then there's the guys that, like, honestly, there's a couple of guys on my team are in the draft this year or going to get drafted next year. And those guys were like kind of just the guys that are like head down, don't talk to anybody, just fucking grind.
Yeah, damn. Well, let's just go off of that and talk about a little bit about your insight. Being a college football player, how much value do you think that adds to placing bets on the NFL draft? Do you use a lot of your background and just in terms of kind of what to look for in players, and are you using your background as a quarterback to kind of decide on maybe who to bet, to go early or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. Like for the quarterback side of it, I mean, just like the X's and O's, like understanding like what offenses run. Like I know you're a Niners fan, right? So like you're under center, you're running like gap schemes, play action rollouts. You know what I mean? So you got to know what players fit that system. Like last year, I saw guys like giving out like Max Whale picks for like the Niners picking like who was it, Mac Jones and all those guys, and it was like the clearest thing that they were gonna get Trey Lance. Like if you just watched him in college, which I played against him. But if you just watch the system he played in college, like it literally matches up perfectly with the Niners. You know what I'm saying? So just knowing that kind of stuff and the X's and O's and how coaches think, that really helps out for sure.
Well, I like hearing that. First that you played against Trey. That's kind of cool. But then again,
I
that
wasn't
you
in the game, but I was in the Fargo Dome watching.
that's awesome. That's sweet, and it's nice to know that you got a good opinion
That
on
counts.
it.
Cash
Yeah, that
King.
counts.
Coming
That
from a guy who
definitely
sat on the
counts.
bench in a lot of college football games, that counts. Okay.
Hey, I sit in the bleachers at college football games. Does that count, or is
That
that
counts
taking
too,
it
man.
taking it a step too far?
I think it
Maybe.
counts. I mean, as long as you're in the first row, it's not that much of a worse view than I had.
There you go. There you go. All right, let's get back to the draft. I would love to talk about just kind of going off what you're kind of when you're building a slate. I know last year was a little weird because there was all that quarterback drama and who's going in the top 3, who's going in the top 10, whatever. This year it's a little different. We got edge heavy draft, a lot of linemen, a couple
Yeah.
receivers that might sneak into the top 10. Quarterbacks are kind of all over the place if you look at different mocks. So when you're looking at the draft, especially this year, where are you finding value and kind of what are you staying away from?
Yeah, so I think the team needs, like I said, is a big thing. Like just how many teams really need a quarterback in the first rounds? Like I think the over under is set at 2.5 for that. Which I mean, I guess I can give that. Should I tell you what I feel about that right now?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Give out some
Hey,
Over
freebies.
2.5.
yeah.
I mean, I think Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett are definitely going to go in the first round, and then they just invited Matt Corral to the draft. So I think I'm going to take the over 2.5 for sure. I mean, I don't think they're going to invite Matt Corral to just sit there and not get drafted. You know what I mean? They only invite a certain amount of guys, and it's less than 32. You know what I mean? They don't have guys that are going to sit there and not get drafted.
Question for you. Do you think the NFL's got like some insider intel when they send out those invites? Like, are they talking to the GMs like, hey, we don't look like clowns if we invite all these guys, right?
They
So
have to. Yeah, they have to.
there's got to be some edge there, right?
There has to be edge there. I mean, why would you even like want to do a kid like that? You know, because you also get, like you said, you get invited. Like it's not like, oh, I'm gonna come to the draft. It's like, no, you have to be good enough to get invited.
It's even awkward when guys, even like Mac Jones,
Lamar Jackson,
slip,
remember Lamar Jackson?
yeah, slip late
That was
in the.
awkward.
It's like
Aaron Rodgers.
dude,
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers. It's awkward TV.
Yeah.
It really
No,
is.
do you think, I mean, in that case, especially when you're talking about Lamar and Rodgers, it's like those two guys were quarterbacks. I mean, Lamar obviously was a little less heralded because they were trying to move him to receiver, which seems to be a common theme. But with Rodgers, it was like this kid could go number 1. He slides to what, 25 or 24, and it's
Crazy.
I don't know if you've ever seen they did like a little NFL films on it, and it's just it's brutal watching him sit there. It's like, I mean,
It's also
obviously
crazy to think.
go ahead.
They were saying he was 6'2" and couldn't play in the NFL, and now these kids are like 5. Kyler Murray got drafted first? He was 5'11". He was 6'2". That was 6 years ago. How the league has changed is so crazy.
Teams are just, it seems like teams have completely changed how they look at roster configuration. It's like, there's so many different players that can fit the mold now. I mean, even like thinking about slot receivers and talking about, how those guys fit into it, now they're starting to move up the draft boards, right? They're starting to slide up a couple rounds earlier because we start to see these really successful guys, Renfro, Welker, Edelman. I mean, all those different guys that have just been, they're shown out. I want to talk a little bit more. I know I don't want to give out too many of your picks, but I'd love for you to give out a couple of your favorites that maybe you're willing to share. in terms of even just, sticking to the top 5, maybe not giving out some of those later round value picks, but maybe just sticking with the top, or maybe something with the Trayvon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson situation. I don't know if you got a nice little, insight you want to give us.
Yeah, for sure. I think I like Drake London to be the first wide receiver taken. I think it's like plus 500, so it's really good value there. He's a beast. I mean, he's 6'5". I've actually seen him play. He went to USC. He's off the charts. He checks every single box. I mean, a guy that can just go into the league right now and just line up at the receiver spot one-on-one and just beat the corner. I mean, you can't really find that everywhere. It's almost like DK Metcalf, and he fell a lot, which is but now, I mean, maybe they'll learn from that. So, and then like I said, the over 2.5 quarterbacks. And then I like Kenny Pickett to get drafted to the Panthers. The reason I like that is there's some background information between that. So Matt Rule was the coach at Temple, and Kenny Pickett, who was 2 years younger than me, was a quarterback maybe 15 minutes down the street from me. Matt Rule was like obsessed with him, offered him to Temple, kept offering him. He didn't take it and went to Pitt. So now Matt Rule has another chance to take Kenny Pickett, and I think he might get him now. So we'll see how that pans out.
This is a great case study, like, for big picture. Walk us through like what people can bet on in the NFL draft and how you do your research for how you actually want to fill your slate. Like, do you have specific, like, I want to do one position prop, I want to do 2 actual picks of a player to a team, I want to guess, or I shouldn't say guess, what am I fucking talking about? I want to bet on one first position drafted is player X. Like, I think myself, it's not an event I've ever bet. I'm sure a lot of our listeners haven't bet it before. Talk us through like the different categories that are interesting to you to find value, and like your checklist as you work down the slate.
So there's like so many categories. It probably grows every year. I mean, I'm trying to think. There's probably like over 50 categories, honestly. But I mean, I know there's, for the high odds ones, it's like picking 1, 2, 3 perfectly. I know you can get like plus 1,200 places, all that type of stuff for high odds there. But like I said, for me, where I find my value is mostly like positioned over and under. So like I said, quarterbacks over and under, receivers over and under in the first round, and then also just NFL draft. Also, it's supposed to be fun. Like, I'll probably pound the 2.5 quarterbacks, something I like with like even odds. But like, Drake London plus 500, it's fun. You know what I mean? Like, we're watching the draft, having fun with it.
A lot of sprinkles. Exactly.
High level, high value plays that I think, just X's and like Trey Lance, I hit pretty good last year because of that. Just stuff like that, But when it comes to like the over under with the numbers of positions that are taken, that takes more of like a real like cap. Like, I'm gonna go into baseball or something like that, compared to like me just sprinkling on Drake London going first. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, he's third on the list to go first, so it'd be a pretty. You know what I mean? It's not supposed to happen. That's why those odds are like that.
When it comes to players, are you getting in the film for the draft specifically, or is it just all this knowledge you accumulate over an NFL and college football season that informs your team-specific needs and how a given college player may fit those needs?
Right. It's kind of a lot of things. I would say stats-wise, film-wise, for sure. And then me just watching the games from the season before, and then the All-Star games too. There's the Senior Bowl and all those big-time like bowls. It's like the Senior Bowl, all those All-Star bowls. There's millions of them now. I mean, every single senior gets invited to them. Every single guy's going to draft. So you watch how they perform there. You see what teams talk to them there. You see also, like, you kind of can't get too caught up in what teams say because they're going against other teams. You know what I mean? So they're trying to smoke screen everybody. So you can't really get caught up in all of that in the media. But when it comes to like the first round for the first pick, like we talked about that before, how those odds like change so drastically. To me, that's like total stay away. Like, you have to stay away from that because the market knows more than us at the end of the day. Even though, we can hit 60% of our bets, but we'll never know more than Vegas. You know what I mean? So they changed those odds for a reason. So I have no business betting Aiden Hutchinson going first anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna. Go ahead, Lou.
Easton.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as you're talking about kind of line movement, I feel like most of our listeners are probably going to be betting on day of. I know I've heard a lot with kind of more insiders, experts on the draft. They're betting months in advance because that's when you can find good lines.
Right.
But a lot of the stuff, it happens on Wednesday. It happens on Thursday morning where you get all this kind of chatter from the team. So when you're thinking about line movement, you said you're kind of staying away from Hutchinson because we're starting to see the market trend away from him.
Right.
How much are you factoring line movement into kind of your plays that you're maybe putting on the day of, or kind of live bets that maybe you're looking at?
Yeah, so with like a drastic change like that, I would take into account like a lot. But like if the odds go from like -110 to like -130, like honestly, that would probably make me stay away than go to it because I don't want to eat the juice, and then now I'm just going with the public bet. But like the +200 to like the -200, like that's like pretty drastic, and to me that means like they know something that I don't. You know what I mean? Because for them to change that, they don't want to lose money on it. You know what I mean? So it's probably gonna happen. If not, because honestly, now that people look at it, like, oh, if people don't know anything, oh, I'm gonna go bet Aiden Hutchinson first. You know what I mean? And everyone's gonna do that, and now they're gonna lose all their money.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
just
how it goes for
remember
me.
I remember last year, like right kind of leading up to the draft, there was a lot, like we talked about maybe a little bit earlier, there was a lot of speculation around Mac Jones going 3, and how
Yeah.
Trey kind of had this come up in the days going leading up to it. And I just remember I was like, there's no way that this team is taking Mac Jones with Jimmy
No.
and Jimmy as the starter. It just felt like they were trying to change the system. So I just thought that was a really interesting kind of factor in. I was like, that was the first time I had bet the draft, and it was just because I really wanted to see Trey Lance on my team, but also it felt like it was just all leading towards that. All this Mac Jones media speculation was all
Yeah.
just smoke. There was no fire to go with the smoke. It was all just kind of this these guys saying, you hear certain analysts say, oh, this is a guy I like, and that somehow translates to teams, but teams have such different draft boards. It's something you can't look at. It's not always singular. It's
Exactly.
these teams
The
are.
teams aren't working for us.
No, exactly,
Just
and media doesn't work for them either.
exactly. No, and that's where it becomes tough because the teams throwing smoke screens can mess us up at the same time. But like you said, the Mac Jones one was kind of obvious. Also, like I said before, just the X's and O's aspect of it. Like it really didn't make any sense for them to take Mac Jones. And yeah, that's basically it, honestly.
Cash King, you mentioned finding success last year with Trey Lance prop. You talked about confidence in the first wide receiver picked this year and the quarterback total in round 1.
Mm-hmm.
Common denominator here is offense.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a former QB in college.
Correct.
Are you a lot better at capping offense given the X's and O's and can crush tape so much better? Like I'm thinking about an unfair advantage for you as a capper and like knowing how to analyze offensive tape like a GM would. That's like a huge offensive advantage or
For
unfair
sure.
advantage
I would
versus the
definitely find
capper.
more VAP. Sorry. What'd you say?
So is your slate skewed towards offense, or you feel like you're good at cranking down defensive players as well when it comes to the draft?
I mean, definitely more towards offense, just like you said, because I enjoy it so much. Like I could sit down and turn on a tape and like sit there and actually enjoy it that other people probably can't. So just me enjoying it, and I just get even just naturally, just like watching something on Twitter or watching something on YouTube. Me just like my knowledge from that is I'm taking away more than the average person is from just watching a clip. You know what I mean? And then I have to take that and then think about. So I would definitely bet on more offensive than defensive props. Also, just because I don't like defenses, so my whole point is to beat them. So Drake London to me seems like a great matchup problem for somebody.
Love
I think
it.
that was a really interesting question that Lewis just asked, and kind of going off of that, I'm curious again, since you're so obviously engaged with offensive football. Do you find that it blinds you at all when you're coming to the draft? Like in terms of, again, this could be a defense heavy draft, especially at the edge rush.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think that, again, because you prefer betting on offense, that it's blinding you from maybe seeing some of the defensive guys slide up the draft? Or are you still pretty well tuned in where that doesn't really impact you that much?
There's certain players I've always followed. Like I love Thibodeau. I watched him play in high school, and he did a Jadeveon Clowney like he did at South Carolina, like just came in and crushed the running back before he even got it. I was like, wow, that kid's gonna be legit. Like for that question, like just yes, but for certain guys, like I have followed and know them and respect them at a certain level where that I do know a lot about them. But at the end of the day, I would probably bet more offensive props than defensive props just because that's where my mind is, you know?
Oh, for sure. I think Thibodeau is an interesting situation. I think he and Derek Stingley kind of go along together, especially because
Yeah.
they were such high recruits out of high school. There was all this talk about these guys are going to be top 10 picks, lock it down. It's happening. But then as kind of more of this stuff has come out, we've seen both guys slide down the draft board a little bit because their tape maybe isn't as clean as some of these guys see.
Yep.
Do you think that how much do you think high school rankings factors into it? Do you think these analysts that are putting out these mock drafts are a little bit that they're wrong, that they're kind of looking at it differently than GMs because they're seeing more of the highlights from, again, high school tapes, or Stingley is obviously a couple years removed from when he was really successful. Do you think that's an important factor in terms of, when you're deciding on a slate?
I say yes and no, but like for like Thibodeau, for example, like nowadays it's crazy because the league is like changing so much. Where like it used to be like a high school, you get recruited to where you're gonna be. Like, okay, this kid's 6'5", we can put weight on him. He's gonna play left tackle in 3 years. Now these kids in high school are still raw, and then now the NFL is drafting them to like prep them to be great. So like Thibodeau is just like a freak of nature. Like he's like off the charts of all of his like metrics. So like maybe he doesn't go crazy on tape, and he also fought injuries a lot this year. So I wouldn't say the high school like rankings goes into it as much, but like he was ranked there for a reason. Is probably because of his size and his skill at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So they're almost drafting nowadays for where you're gonna be in like 4 years than now. But obviously they want them to play now and they're gonna be successful now. But if they see a guy with like a frame that they could keep building and be better, that's just another plus.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think that's
Yeah.
great analysis.
It
I
used to
was
not be
talking.
like that though. Go ahead, Lewis. Sorry.
Sorry, no, my bad. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and like one of my big beliefs is a big predictor of whether or not you make it to the NFL and stick is just staying healthy in college
Yeah.
and not missing off seasons of development. When you think about betting the draft, how do you think about GMs like weighting the risk of a guy who's got a big injury history? Like we were talking about Shane Scove, who was like the man in college, like literally made in a lab, middle linebacker, freshman, sophomore year, 25 tackles a game, blew out his knee, ended up going undrafted and having to scrap his way back into a 53-man roster. How do you think about GM's appetite to draft guys who have an injury history?
Yeah, we've seen it a lot on the last couple of years, honestly. Like a lot of teams have not drafted, and all these guys have fallen. Like I remember Miles Jack fell really far 1 year too. Like we knew he was probably gonna fall, but like fell drastically. And then so also it's kind of goes off the GM. Like Jerry Jones, he loves to take the guys that like not everyone's so high on. You know what I mean? The guys that maybe just got arrested or something. Like he loves like the guys that you don't think you're gonna get drafted. He'll pick them up on free agency or draft them. You know what I mean? So it kind of goes by each GM. So like I know if say that 1 year the Cowboys needed a receiver and the best receiver in the class maybe was hurt or had something going on off the field, Jerry Jones would have no problem drafting him. You know what I mean? But per se, another team like the Patriots, Bill Belichick is not going near that player. You know what I mean? So it's kind of team to team, and then that's where the team needs comes in. Team needs come in as well because they need this guy. Oh, this guy got in trouble, so he could still technically go to that team. But I try to stay away from that kind of stuff. Honestly, the injured guys because there's just so much like variance that you really can't even know unless you're in the draft room or in the doctor's office. Because when these guys go to their pro day visits and they bring doctors to examine these players, So I don't even know if the doctor checks all the boxes, then I guess they'll draft them, So it's hard to even know what they're thinking.
I think injuries are really interesting too. Just I'm thinking about a couple of players this year. Obviously Jamison Williams, who got hurt right at the end of the season, but I don't know if you've seen the videos, but he already looks like he's kind of rounding back into form. And so he slid early, and now he's almost sliding back up the draft boards because teams are seeing that he's healthy. Or even like a guy like David Ojabo, who obviously he tore his Achilles, which that can be a near career-ending injury in some cases. And he kind of slid down, but now he's sliding back up. So I think the injury, perspective, I think teams are a little bit more cognizant of, if we miss a guy for a couple of months, it's not going to impact the future. These guys are
Right.
for 10 years down the line, not for, the 2022 season.
Exactly.
So that's just, I feel like that's my outlook on it. But I feel like, injuries are really interesting. One of the other things about this draft that I think is especially fascinating is, I don't know if I'm getting this number exactly right, but I thought I heard earlier that like 8 teams or something have 2 picks in the first round.
Yeah.
Do you think, with the team having 2 picks, obviously for that first pick, they can really address that, maybe position of need or area of need. Um, how do you think, are you changing your factor? Are you changing your betting, the way that you're kind of handling your slate, depending on if a team has 2 picks, maybe some of those guys, like I mentioned, Jameson Williams or David Ojabo, slide into a late first round pick just because these teams have already gotten that guy secured and now they have a little bit more kind of room to play with. Do you think that factors in at all?
I would say definitely a factor in. And also, you got to be careful because a lot of the teams with 2 first-round picks, they'll get their guy they want. If they do get the guy they want with the first one, they'll trade back and then get more value in the draft. So they'll trade back into the first round. Like maybe they'll go from the 18th to the 26th and then grab a third-round pick on the way, So if they grab, that's where you can get into some trouble, because now someone just jumped the board and maybe someone's going to grab a quarterback. Maybe someone's going to grab the edge rusher. So that's where the whole entire draft just gets messed up when that happens. Like the Giants did a couple years ago. I'm a Giants fan. I wouldn't doubt if the Giants do that again, honestly, just because we need so many pieces. So that the trades really can mess up the draft. And then, like you said, the 2 first-round picks, that goes in hand in hand with the trades because people that get their needs with their first pick, now they're like, okay, let's just grab some more value and more players. And it depends on the team, too. Like the Giants need a lot of guys. The 49ers don't need that many guys,
Yep. Well, I don't want to hold you for too long. I think to wrap up, I think it'd be great to, since you mentioned my 49ers, why not just keep talking about them for a little while? One of the bets I was looking at that I thought was really interesting was the Mr. Irrelevant bet. I look back at a little bit of the history. It looks like there's not much in terms of finding a pattern. I think offensive players seem to go more likely to go in that last pick, but the 49ers are picking with Mr. Irrelevant this year. I know they don't need defense. I think their defense is still pretty stacked, and I think they can address it earlier in the draft. So personally, I'm looking at it and saying, God, this seems pretty easy to just take offense and kind of check it off the box and think that I'm going to cash that money. Are you thinking about putting a bet on Mr. Irrelevant? Is that something you ever really think about, or is that too far down in the draft where it just doesn't even matter?
Yeah, no, you actually brought that to my attention, and then I looked into it a little bit, like you said, in the splits of the years past. I mean, you can't. I didn't really get much from that, but if you just look at the 49ers, like you said, they need offense compared to defense. I mean, their defense has been elite for a couple years now, so just off that, they need offensive pieces. So why not grab some depth at the end of that? And then also, it's an offensive league, man. The league's changing, more pieces, more speed, more everywhere. It's an offensive league, so why not grab a piece that it can help you out in the future in the last pick of the draft.
Yeah, well, I think that the insight on it is an offensive league at this point. I think that can again we've seen a lot of running backs slide into the end of the first round of the draft, and sometimes they're not supposed to go there, and we see a lot of wide receivers go in that kind of 20 to 32 range. So I think that's again as we're seeing a new a new NFL. Everything's starting to change. It's quarterback driven league. It's all about points, points, points. There's always that old adage that's defense wins championships, but there's a lot that goes into offense at this point. So, I think it's really interesting to just see. I'm just excited to see how the draft pans out. It's one of my favorite days of the year. I'm assuming it's one of your favorite days of the year, especially from a betting
Sure.
perspective.
And as a Giants
Um,
fan.
and as a Giants fan, although they screwed it up a couple of times.
I'm saying that's what I can look
Danny,
forward to.
Yeah.
yeah, seriously, better than Sundays in the fall. Danny Dimes, 2-sentence, no, yeah, 3-word appraisal.
I can't give you a 3-word appraisal, but we got to give him one more. I'm cool with giving him one more year.
One more year. There you
One more
done.
year. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. One more year.
Get that can't out of your vocabulary.
I was going to give you a whole analyst,
There you go. This was an awesome show. I've never bet the draft. I'm definitely going to now. I think hopefully our listeners, if they're not already vets, will feel the same way and get a flavor for your kind of approach to the draft and football more broadly. We got to get you back on to talk your broader approach to the capping game, but super interesting insights. And I'm sure we'll make watching draft day this weekend all the more fun. So
make some coin.
Amen to that. Let's stack some chips. And as you said, it's a great event to sprinkle a bunch of plus money and just sit down on the couch with some pizza and beer and hopefully turn a little bit of money into a little bit more. So thanks again, my friend.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.